So in this session, we're going to be talking about how we design a monitoring system. Let us think for a moment, what is a monitoring system? It's really that place where we pull everything together. So we could say it's a set of organized procedures. And it would include things like the rules and criteria for deciding what information is required, when and where. A process of data collection, storage, processing, and reporting. A mechanism whereby information is used to influence the activities of the organisation, programme, or project. It's around the collection of data to report to funders and external stakeholders, and of course to management. And it's also part of the evaluation system. So although we're talking about the monitoring system, it will contribute to the midterm and final evaluation. What are we going to monitor? Well, we're going to be monitoring a number of things. Certainly we need to monitor the progress towards outcomes. So are we making progress towards what were our intending outcomes, or have some been achieved and we can say, great, that one has been done. We're going to be monitoring the factors that contribute to or impede achievement of the outcomes. So what are the issues that we are facing that might be slowing us down, making things difficult? We'll also be looking at how we're progressing from output to outcomes. So looking at the output and ensuring that the output is actually delivering the outcome that we intended to happen. If you've got a partnership, then it would probably be also monitoring the activities of partners and checking that the partnership arrangement that you have in place is working as planned and delivering the results that you expect. And of course, very important, it's also about any lessons that are being learned during the implementation process so that we can put those lessons into practice to both improve what we're doing and share the successes and indeed failures with project personnel. And also, you probably will need to be monitoring the resources that you're using, so the inputs, and also, are we doing the activities that we said we would be doing, and how are we progressing with each of those? So management, what do they need? Well, they're going to need information around implementation. So in terms of the progress of the activities according to the plan. So simple things like the physical procurement, or if it's got staff training, are we doing that? The performance, are objectives being achieved? So if it was a roads project, are the roads being built? If it's a training project, is the community training completed, and so on. And also looking around cost effectiveness. Are we doing things for the best value for money? And value for money is something we need to consider increasingly. And there is a separate section in this course around value for money. And as we said earlier, management would also be keen to know how we are progressing towards achieving our outcomes. And of course, any lessons to be learned so that any learning can be shared with everybody. How is monitoring done? Well, it's really done by routinely collecting records and notes of what is doing. And it's this simple checking that we can call monitoring. So when information is collected in a planned, organized, and systematic way. So information would be collected at specific times. So it's important to think of a monitoring and evaluation system as it's information, not the data. The data merely is what we input. The system is what we do with that data, how we process it, and the output is the information. So a system will be trying to get the data, having it in a process of analysis and reporting, trying to get that information as the output. Information is important to a project, program, or an organization to allow it to perform efficiently and effectively. And it can be said, the better the information we can supply from a monitoring evaluation system, the better the resources are managed. So what would be the key steps if you had to set up an M&E system? There are 7. Firstly, stakeholder analysis. Understand your stakeholders. What do they need in terms of information? What are they doing in terms of contributing to the project or program? And you can have a look in another section of this course around stakeholder analysis and some of the techniques you could use. Essential to have a theory of change. And again, make sure that you have watched the video and the PowerPoint on theory of change. The theory of change is important because it gives us the story of what we're trying to do. And if we have the story, then we can design our system to be measuring progress in and around that story. Logical framework is critical because in the logical framework, you really do have your M&E system, because in the middle 2 columns, you have your indicators and means of verification for each of your outputs and for your outcome and your goal. So from the logical framework, it sort of forms the basis of your M&E system. So ensure you've got that in place. Designing your indicators is a critical element of an M&E system. So the system will really include every indicator and how you are going to collect data on that indicator and the purpose of that indicator. This is easily done if you set up a series of indicator reference sheets. And if you have a look at the section on indicators, that is explained, and there is some examples of an indicator reference sheet. Then you have to think in terms of data collection, how you're going to collect it, when are you going to collect it, and how you're going to manage that process. You then also, what are you going to do with your data in terms of analysis and how you're going to analyze data, how you're going to report. And finally, it's a good idea to document the whole system so that everybody in the project, program, or organization can understand what the whole M&E system looks like. Some of the considerations: the architecture, i.e. how you're going to design it, the infrastructure and the resources that you need, the question around information and knowledge management, and integration with other systems. So if you are running a project that's part of a bigger organization, how do you relate your project to that organization? So you might have a sort of organizational management information system, but also a project M&E system. So you need to kind of think about that relationship. Stakeholder analysis is all about identifying the different stakeholders that are involved in our project or program. Theory of change, as I said before, it's about the story and the narrative. If you have that in place, we're very clear what we're trying to do. Again, if you're not sure about theory of change, watch the video on theory of change. Here is an example of what a theory of change might look like for a particular program. Logical framework. Make sure you have a logical framework in place for the project. So if you've got a number of projects, each project would need its own logical framework. Design all the indicators. How will you measure success? Think about data collection and manage in terms of which data collection methods, what already exists. You might be able to use existing data collection methods, and that kind of simplifies things. And you also need to think at this stage in terms of planning for data analysis. How will you analyze your data? Again, watch the other section around data collection where we talk about different methods. And you have to consider, are you going to use quantitative ones and qualitative ones, or combine qualitative and quantitative, which is really what we would advise that you do. Try to make the data collection process as simple as possible. Try to collect data as part of ongoing work where possible. Collect only data that is needed and will be used. Don't be tempted to over-collect. It just causes issues in terms of data analysis and workload. Consider that any disaggregation, do you need to separate maybe according to urban and rural, or by gender, men and women, or by age? So do think in terms of any disaggregation that you think that you will be required to do. Think in terms of the workload, how much work is required for your staff to collect this data. And generally be creative in your methods to collect data. Again, watch all the videos on data collection to give you a good idea around the different methods. You're going to have to think of data management. So in terms of how you capture, clean, organize and store, analyze, review and interpretation. And again, we have another video and PowerPoint on data management. Something you will need to think about in your M&E system. Are you going to use a paper-based system? And by paper-based system, I mean using a computer like with Excel, which is a very common method to take data in. Or are you going to try and use some of the more computer-based systems where your data is stored in the cloud in a central server? And this is becoming a lot easier now because there are many of these systems available that you can buy, and they're all kind of set up. So all you really need to do is put your data in. It will do the analysis and produce the reports and dashboards. So a lot of these computer systems make a M&E system quite easy. Long gone are the days when we needed to design our own system from scratch. We can really do it with these apps these days. So monitoring is most useful when it is used to correct problems and improve implementation. And remember, this is a critical thing of why we have our system. Do think in terms of the information flow. So right through from collection through the project and beyond the project. So, you may well have to report within your organization or to funders. So you're going to have to report into their systems. And so reporting is an important part of your M&E system. I would say information management is first and foremost people communicating with one another about events that affect the work of their organization, program, or project. And lastly, make sure you document the monitoring system. This could be in the form of a diagram that captures the whole system along with a document. I like to produce a diagram because it's quite useful to sort of show that. And you can do a diagram that shows all the elements of the system. And that is something that you pass around. Important that the system is shared with your management and with all project staff so that we create ownership of what we're trying to do. So in terms of planning, agree on the data collection methods, establish the baseline data, agree on data storage and analysis, agree around who collects, the when and the timeline, decide around information management and sharing. And whilst not technically part of the monitoring system, you should also be considering how evaluation fits into the system, because it is, in a sense, part of monitoring. It's just a periodic part. So in your system, you can define when you expect an evaluation to take place. So, for example, there may well be a mid-term review or final evaluation, and beyond the project evaluation to measure impact. So that can be recorded in the process. You should have a work plan which will detail the activities, the time they will be conducted, targeted numbers, any milestones, and what is expected in terms of achievement. So create a work plan for your M&E system. Some hints: use a team approach in order to reflect the diversity of needs through the institution, project or program. It's good if you've got somebody in senior management who really appreciates what the system is doing and they become a strong advocate for the system. Ensure all project staff, program and organizational staff are with you and understand the system. So do spend some time briefing them on the system so they feel part of the system, because some people may actually be slightly fearful of the monitoring part of the work that's happening. I think it's fair to say most managers do not suffer from a lack of information. I think often it's actually the opposite problem, that we have an excess of irrelevant information. So one of the skills of your system is think of the user as a consumer. What do they really need? How little can we get away with? How can we summarize it? So if a senior manager only wants a 2-page dashboard report, then create a 2-page dashboard report, not a 70-page full report. Yeah? So think about that. Things like dashboards now are very useful because they do generally summarize, and also they allow people to select what they want. So that's something else to be thinking about. A general principle I've found is often less is more. So often we overthink what we need, and therefore one of the things we need to do in our system is how we can reduce it. In terms of questions you need to answer for your system: who is going to use the information? What for? How much detail do they need? When? And what form? What information can we get from our monitoring system? So you've got to think in terms of the reports. Are we going to have aggregated reports, summary reports, routine reports, exception reports, ad hoc query? As I said before, if you move to a dashboard style system, that is quite good, because you in the monitoring department can actually put all the information up into the dashboard, and actually allows the user themselves to select what they require just by applying some queries to the data. And a lot of these computer app systems do that. You can also, of course, do that in an Excel spreadsheet through the use of filters. You might well have to produce some periodic and scheduled reports. So think about what that report looks like. And again, in your system, document the type of reports that will be produced at what stage. Exception reports, those are ones that are used to report variance from past performance. So useful if we're looking to see where things might be changing that we need to be aware of and understand why that change is happening. Ad hoc or on-demand reports are those where someone has a particular question. Often we find, for example, a minister in a public service structure might well ask you for some specific information because he or she has been requested by somebody to give that particular answer. So your system needs to be set up so that ad hoc or on-demand project reporting can happen. It can be a little bit annoying because you have to dig down, but think about the type of system in place so it's relatively easy for that to happen. Think in terms of online analytical processing, and what we mean here is how the system itself will process the data you put in. And this is the big advantage a lot of these computer applications, because you put in the data, but the data is analyzed within the computer system and produces the reports. So if you put in the query, the report is done. In a sense, what Excel does when you have all the formulas and tables in place. So of course, if you're going to use Excel, one of the things you need to build into your system is the tables you want and setting up the formulas so they become generated as a table or a chart as the data is entered into the system. So, typically here, this is an example from EFAD of a data entry system you could have in a routine monitoring that you've set up in a computer-based system. So your role is to enter it, and then the data is available as a report. Think in terms of presentation of data, in terms of tables, when to use, what to emphasize, what to avoid. It's worth spending time around the presentation side of data. I think data visualization is very interesting. A tool that's come in recently now is Power BI. And again, in the course here, I've got a little outline of how to do that. That's a free application from Microsoft. And it takes data from an Excel file and generates some very nice tables, charts, and so on. Other people might use Tableau, and other people would just generally use Excel-driven tables. Graphs. I like graphs. They're useful for showing trends. And again, there's a range of graphs and charts that you can generate. Generally very easily done now in Excel and some of these other programs. So in conclusion, monitoring information is most useful when it is used to correct problems and improve implementation, and about planning the flow of information from the project level up through administrative levels. So in this short session, I just wanted to introduce some of the ideas around a monitoring system. So have a go at doing that. There is no set framework or method or way to document it, but it has to be able to describe the whole system that you're going to have in place for your project. And you can also, as I said, I say monitoring system, but it could also be called monitoring and evaluation system if you prefer. So I hope this little presentation helps. The PowerPoint is also available as a separate PDF, so you can have a look at that. And there is also a short video on a monitoring system. So good luck setting up your monitoring system. And again, if you need any help or advice, do contact me, and I might even have some examples I can share with you. Thank you.